Hey fam, what's going on? This is Jessica Pickens. Welcome to Pickens Realities, our Blended Family Truths podcast.
Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Pickens Realities and Blended Family Truths, where we talk about blended family matters because blended families matter.
Yes, we do. And yes, they do. Again. Yes.
So I am Jayla, the greatest all-knowing sibling, person, friend, entrepreneur, socialite, esthetician.
There you go.
You know?
Plug it, girl. Plug it.
Yeah. This is...
I am Jessica. I am the mom and the wife of the Pickens family and the hostess with the mostest on Pickens Realities and Blended Family Truths as we continue conversations to be a blessing to people out there on what's going on in the blended family world.
Yes. So today we are going to talk about trust in blended families, specifically African American blended families.
Okay.
So I have some questions that are a little thought-provoking, but they're not going to be specifically tailored to like us per se, but more generally speaking.
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's get into it. So how does the historical and cultural significance of family in the African American community influence the way trust is built or broken in blended families?
Ooh. So again, we're talking specifically about Black blended families then, because we're coming from our knowledge and perspective. And this is more of, I'm repeating the question to make sure I understand. How does the history of what Black people have been through historically
influence the way we trust, the way trust is built or broken?
In blended families,
yes.
In Black blended families specifically. Man, well, one, I think I've had a conversation with multiple friends, family, colleagues who are Black and in blended families. And we have discussed that a lot of times, in many instances, people didn't even realize that what they grew in was a blended family because it's kind of like, it just was family because that's what we had to do to survive, right? Excuse me. And so, like, for instance, I think that historically, when you look at the impact of slavery on Black families and how Black families were broken apart, where just the logistics of, men being forced to breed and make
women
babies,
as well.
You know what I'm saying? Women as well, right? And so creating these situations where the root of that crossing over into, and so, the root of those scenarios, let me finish that thought real quick. Like, for instance, if you had a father who was with one family and he got sold to another family, and now the kids may be being raised by the mother and the grandmother, right? Or just the grandmother, if the mother and the father was, sold or the family was separated, right? And so Black people as a community and culture here in America having to overcome the ramifications and consequences of what that has looked like that began during that era, it became innate and natural because we're survivors, right? We have to do what we have to do to survive and keep it together. And so it is not unusual for our people in our community to automatically have non-traditional types of situations because people step up and step in order to keep the family together the best that you can. For instance, it's not in many, and of course this is not blanket, you can't speak for every individual, every single family, but for families and people that we know, that I know, and for us, right? It's like, if there's a situation going on with one of my kids and I have a grandchild that needs someone to step in and take over, that's automatic. It's not a question, right? I'm not going to let my grandchild go into the system, or I'm not going to let my grandchild, be placed in jeopardy and not have a place to stay or not have a safe environment because we're family. That's what we do. So even though it's not my direct responsibility, if there's some life consequences that have presented where I've got to step up and step into a role, in a parent role, even though it's not my child, it's my grandchild, or it's my niece or my nephew or whatever may have you. Shoot, we've done it for people that we have no blood relationship with, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's who we are. We understand God assignments, and we understand doing our best to keep family together and to create a healthy, safe environment, to be, even for when it's not our direct responsibility. And I think that the root of a lot of that comes from our ancestors, and that's what we've been built to do. It's like in our DNA, ingrained in us. We talked that last episode about my dad's side of the family, which was, my dad was Black, my mom is white. And so he was raised by his grandmother.
Right.
Right. And there were, and she had been remarried. So there was, blended family structure there, but she stepped up and did what she had to do in raising her grandchildren because their mom, life scenarios and choices being made, they were raised by my great grandmother. Right. And so she stepped up and did what she had to do. And she actually was a direct product of, her mother was a slave, and she was actually mixed. My great grandmother was mixed, and she was conceived by my great great grandmother and the slave master. And my great great grandmother, from again, my aunt told me this story, took the baby and left her on the father's doorstep. So she was actually raised as a mixed child in the white family, right? But she turned around and knew who she was, and then she stepped up and became the hub and the linchpin for her family when she turned around and raised her grandchildren, when her daughter, my grandmother, made choices, and that's what it turned out to be. So just survivability and keeping family together in untraditional ways and doing what you have to do to create the best family unit that you can. To me, that, the historical residue and just the generational context, as far, or generational, not context, traits, right? Like that's what I know of my family. So I can speak to that, and I can look and see the spirit of my great grandmother. Y'all know who how I am. That's how I am.
So how do you, so boom, there's the systematic, cultural, reality that we have, right? So how do you feel as though the things that we've experienced as a people, how has that affected how we're able to build or break trust?
As a family?
Or being in blended families.
Or
like, how does that affect trust being built or broken?
So,
because, like, boom, I'm in the slave times. I'm your great grandmother.
That's a whole lot of greats. I'm not.
So I'm your great grandmother. I'm conceived. My mom is a slave, and my dad's a slave master. Right.
Oh, my great grandmother. Or are you talking about her mom? Her mom. So that would be great. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So,
my mom's a slave. My dad's a slave master. My mom's like, yeah, you want to rape me and have, make me have this baby. Here, you take care of it. So now I'm growing up in a household.
Oh, that's just my great grandma.
But yeah, just keep going. These scenarios have happened.
Mm-hmm, correct.
So now I'm growing up in a household, and I'm being raised by my dad, my stepmom, my siblings that are running in there. I'm like, where is my mama at? My mama outside working. I got to sneak to go see mom. Like, how does that affect how trust is built or broken because of the cultural, No,
that's okay. I got you now. That's fair. It would, in my opinion, that would breed a root of mistrust as a foundation. To me, it would make you skeptical and draw lines of not trust. So to your point, I think it would make it more difficult to have trust as a foundation, or for it to be automatic, right? Because of, once you become aware of the consequences of how you came to be, and you looking like, what? You know what I'm saying? Like, yo, this is not cool. Like, how does that work? Like, if black people, during slavery, they were believed to be less than, but we were good enough for you to, make babies with. Mm-hmm. And now for what it's worth, that they took my great grandmother in, right? So it's not like when the baby was left on the step, I mean, they could have like done whatever, made a different choice, but they raised her, they took her in, and she was raised in that white household. So, and the wife of her father knew what the deal was. So there was just a lot of dynamics that went on, you know what I'm saying? But to your point, in my opinion, and because I have to say it's my opinion, because I unfortunately did not have the privilege of being able to have these conversations directly with my family, because they were all passed away when I was born. But again, I glean a lot from my aunt, who has given me my family history, and I would have to say that it absolutely would breed an environment of mistrust. And how you overcome that to create a healthy family unit, it would take a lot.
So then, boom, fast forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now the situation where, like you were saying, the wife knew who the baby was. Boom, fast forward. Now it's side chicks in blended families, and now you stepping out on your marriage. And now you got a whole nother kid, and now you know what you see?
I do.
Boom.
I do.
Right?
Yeah,
so like,
and thank God that hasn't been, I haven't dealt with that.
Because I knock him out. If I know I got it, hey, if y'all come out the woodworks talking about I'm yours, no, you not. Never heard of you.
No, I thank God. I know people who have dealt with that scenario where they have been married and their husband stepped out, and there was another, there was a child created as the result of infidelity. Quick or long relationship, doesn't even matter, right? And people make their choices, and how they have navigated or overcome that foundational trust issue, I don't know. And again, I have learned, in my younger days, I used to make very staunch, stern statements about what I would or wouldn't do. And I have learned not to do that at this age that I'm at now, because it just doesn't always, what you think you'll do in a scenario, you can fat mouth and make all these grandiose statements about it until it hits your doorstep. And at that time, it could be a totally different outcome, right? And feeling. And so,
I know what I would do.
Huh?
I know what I would do. I'm going to stay with you. But I'm going to have my own baby. And now we going to raise 2 out of wedlock babies.
Now, see, that's
and now I got to be the one at the crib with the belly growing, and it's not yours.
Calvin, let's
stay together.
That's a whole lot of drama. Yeah, but the point, let's.
I'm sorry.
I'm like, you just went way left on that. But I think the point of what we want to get at the root of. So for us, thank God, we haven't, as our family, we haven't had to navigate that sort of mistrust issue. But it's a very good topic that you bring, because foundationally, if as a people we are not wisely trusting enough, or giving people the benefit of the doubt out the gate, it's kind of, you take two perspectives. And what I've seen is that typically people are want either type A or type B. Type A being is that you skeptical to everybody, and people gotta earn trust. and I don't trust you until you prove to me that there's that you good, and that you've come through and there's some consistency, and I can see that I can trust you. Or you're type B, where I'm gonna trust you until you give me a reason not to, right? It's like either you start out with presumptive trust and believing the best into, that the person wants the best, or you start out with, yeah, I don't trust anybody. And so until I have some time to get to know you and I understand and see, yeah, you're trustworthy, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that the foundational thing that we want people to understand is that as a family unit, one, I want to make a statement on something that I recently have learned in my studies, and I'm trying to. I can't. It was in one of it was. It might have even been the marriage retreat we were at. I think that's where it was, and it hit me hard like a ton of bricks, because the reality is that when you look in the Word of God, and of course, for us, I to me, people are people, man. They gonna people all day. And so my belief in taking it to the Word of God and going, okay, Jesus, how do you deal with X, or how do you deal with Y or Z? But in the Word of God, it doesn't tell you to trust your spouse. It doesn't tell you to trust people.
It tells you to trust him.
It tells you to trust God.
Because people will let you down.
Because people is gone people, right? And so I was like, man, that is pretty heavy.
That
is, and I was like, and it hit me like a ton of bricks, because it's like we misfocus all the time. Because if I am, and do I believe that you need to have a level of trust with people to have good relationship? I do, absolutely. However,
having complete trust in them,
it could, because people are people. And we're going to make mistakes and we're going to mess up. And so not having the level of, I am not perfect, right? You are not, nobody is perfect. And expecting that is unrealistic.
Right.
And so being able to look back, and I think, and speaking to the first part of your question of like, how did people even survive? Because I'd be like, woo, Jesus, you knew who was built for slavery time, because I wouldn't probably last that long.
This a generation of crash outs.
Man.
Boy, let them try to do slavery on us now. The YNs with the switches coming out.
It just, and so, but having to navigate the nuances of not knowing who you could trust or who was doing what, and how do you create a healthy micro family unit and then navigate a macro,
right? Because then thinking about the whole situation with just what you were just describing about like slavery, and I know we keep talking about slavery, but slavery is very pertinent to how things shifted for Black people and how they live and how they think and how they talk and how they eat, and the list goes on. So from the beginning, Black people have had, from the beginning of before slavery, like there's been blended families, but it's just like broken homes and having
and I'm gonna hold that right there, because you said it when we did our first episode on being Black.
Oh, Jesus was in a blended family?
Jesus was part of a blended family. And I
for sure.
Was like, well, God dog, I never even thought it. And absolutely. And so that's our faith. And so when you look at that, like, it was immaculate conception. Like Joseph,
I mean,
like,
if you want to dive deeper into that, we not even like, God really don't want us to be married because we're all brothers and sisters. But in the Bible, it says if we must, he would like us to join together in union and, but he would rather us not be married peoples. But we have free will. You can look in the Bible. We actually just talked about this recently. Not we, but like I was in my Bible reading this and I was thinking about it. I'm like, that's crazy. But in the Bible, I think it's in, I'm not even gonna act like I know.
That's right. You have to. Well, let's stay on. So,
but I've been in that Bible. Listen, I want to know the Bible so good. You'd think I went to jail.
Well,
don't let that fly over your head, because I'm so serious, because they be knowing it. But anyways, let's circle back. Okay, so slavery is very pertinent and prevalent and relevant and whatever in all things that African Americans do, go through, think, sleep, eat, whatever. So when you were saying, boom, the grandma got to raise the babies because mom and dad got auctioned off, right? Then boom, again, how we're in these situations, right? Mm-hmm. We're in these situations where we have to get handed, to our grandmother. So let's bring it to modern day. Mom and dad end up going to jail, or mom goes off to the military, and dad has to work overseas. Who knows, right? And grandma has to take care of the baby. But then who's to say that we should trust enough that she's going to do right by the baby? Because in slavery, okay, give me your baby and I'll let you have X, Y, and Z. And it's like, yeah, but this is my grandchild. Okay, well then I'm going to whip you, or you know what I'm saying? So it's like, at what cost? I don't know how I want to ask that question. A lot of people in our community say trust is earned, not given, right? And I feel like because of the traumas.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And let's even go a bit deeper and talk really directly to trust within the complete blended family unit and the different stakeholders in including the other bio parents. And so one, and we've talked about, like, your dad and I, have struggled with trust issues kind of subconsciously, and thank God we were, willing and mature enough to engage in counseling from the very beginning in ways that helped us flush this stuff out, because the root of, again, my trust issues with men foundationally started because my dad wasn't in my life, right? And so, and then when you feel like you are responsible for protecting yourself, and when you've been let down by, for me specifically, men, right? Then you feel like, well, if I handle it and I do it, I know I'm going to do my best not to let myself down. It's less risk if I, so ceding that control to my husband was a real challenge for me, just on GP, right? Like over the budget, over, and specifically also then with my firstborn child, with Jayla, right? Because again, we didn't know what we didn't know, and that relationship wasn't there. So it's like my most precious thing that I brought to this marriage. And a lot of times I even put him over myself, right? Feeling like, this is my child, right? Mm-hmm. And so to trust, while I loved your father and I believed within my heart that his intention was good, he had very, very different parenting style from me. And because I hadn't grown up with my dad, I hadn't seen, and
discipline wasn't like a...
Well, Bobby didn't play, so
male discipline wasn't
exactly
right.
And so, not growing up in a household where I had two parents, to see the difference between how a mom operates and a dad operates, I didn't have that. I didn't see it anywhere. And so the reality of the way he disciplined and dealt with you all collectively, my mistrust in him feeling like he was mishandling Jayla, and we've talked about this, right, was one, built on the fact that foundationally it looked and felt like Jayla was treated different because of the lack of relationship. And of course there was no doubt of his love for you all because you were his three babies, right? That came to the family with him. And so there was a real struggle of trust around that, number one, because we were not realistic out the gate. We didn't talk about this stuff up front.
About roles and stuff.
About roles and being able. And so the fact that and just kind of tracking this down and going, okay, how do you take a step back and go, yo, I don't like the way you doing that? Because the reality is love covers a multitude of sins. The reality is, right?
You keep putting your hands on my baby, and I'm finna knock you out.
And so, but that doesn't always get you through. God bless you. God bless you. It doesn't make up for or create trust automatically. Does that make sense?
Do you feel like it breaks it automatically?
What do you mean?
Do you feel like in that specific situation, the trust is ultimately broken, especially in the eyes of the boy, the baby that's experiencing this? Like, oh, I don't trust this mug because I feel like
I mean, I can tell you that was, well, what I've learned, number one, from my experience for men, for my son, for my husband, it actually is more about respect.
Right.
And so their trust is earned more based on respect. Where for girls,
you give what you get.
Trust is based more on love and affirmation.
I might not be a girl.
You know what I'm saying? Cut it out.
Because you got to respect me, period. No, I don't want none of that.
And I'm not saying that.
But I feel like that's also because I've experienced more dad life love interactions. And where I feel like if I spent most of my time with mom, you know,
it may be a different perspective.
I might be like, oh, well, you have to give me flowers.
Think about Isabel right now. Mm-hmm. What is the biggest thing that she expresses every day and she wants? Mom, I love you. Gigi, I love you. Mom, I want a hug. Gigi, I want a hug. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so when we're talking about, you know, how do people get to a place of trust to create a healthier family environment? And particularly, obviously, we're talking about blended families, but just in family units in general, how do you get to root of that? I would take it back to, one, a foundational topic that we talk about all the time: communication. You got to be honest with yourself. You have to be honest with the people that you love, and then use wisdom and maturity in particular, from my perspective, we talk about, get you some daggum help and counseling to be able to say, okay, I got an issue here. I got to, when you get to the root of and you find out that the baseline foundational problem is a trust issue, mm-hmm. you have to be okay figuring out, how do you navigate that correctly?
Right.
Like, how do you have a responsible, mature conversation and agree to some terms and ground rules on how to navigate a sensitive and potentially hurtful topic in a way that keeps people intact? And that's just not easy, right? Like, can you imagine it's slavery time and the baby shows up at your doorstep and you the wife, and you looking at this baby and they a little bit more colorful than the rest of the folks running around your house, and you looking at dude like, what the? But back in those days, a lot of times it wasn't discussed, right? So I can't even imagine, like, I think about my great-grandmother and you growing up in the household and you looking around, and I don't know how, we have to talk to Aunt Margie about this.
I know for a fact from research and studies that I've done, I know for a fact majority of the time, because the innocence of children are just that, innocence of children, the children will always play, kick it, get along. But in some instances, the mom will be so upset at the outside child that she'll make the children be like, no, she has to sit over there and eat, or no, you can't play with her. Like, you don't let her touch your stuff. So the mom will become more vindictive, and then now the dad, and then now the baby's being punished and blah.
Yeah. So you have so to my point, we don't know which way that went. And again, I'm gonna have to call my auntie and ask her because it's an interesting topic to watch, how that ripple effect, because no doubt that for my great-grandmother, whatever she experienced, it informed how she parented my grandma, and then her grandchildren, right? And sometimes, like, it's, and I wonder if there was any sort of guilt factor, and I don't know this to be true, but again, this is one. Now you're making me go, ooh, I need to go back and get as good an understanding that I can. For instance, because I don't even know, like, I'm trying to think of if my aunt has ever told me. I don't know if my dad's mom had siblings or not. Like, I don't know if she was an only child or what the deal was. I need to ask that. But the what I was getting to is I wonder if there were some missteps with how my great grandmother raised my grandmother, right? And when my grandmother decided she was gonna make her decisions, it's kind of like my dad. It's like from what I understand, that's why my dad and his siblings were raised by their grandma, because were raised by their grandmother, which was my great grandmother, right? I know this is a little confusing, but because their mom decided she was living her life, which is what my dad told me.
Because she was resentful from the
Well,
how she had
I
her
don't know.
kid?
I don't know why, right?
I don't know. Because we could sit and talk about this all day. Let's. Okay.
But I'm saying to the point, trust issues and people, sometimes you just make your own decision about who you want to be. But when you get at the root of that, like, what's really the root of that, right? Like, is it because you foundationally don't trust people, period? So I'm gonna do me because I trust me and I'm gonna do what I want to do.
But there's always, regardless, it's always going to be a what happened to make you get to this point.
Correct. And so if what we want to try to drive to and focus around for the intent of, or the benefit, with intention for the benefit of our audience and what we're talking about, when it comes to really foundationally unpacking your stuff and your history, going back as far as you can to get an understanding on who you are and what you're made of and how that has informed the individual that you are, and how does that impact and affect the way that you're living and how you're interacting with your spouse, your kids, you know what I'm saying, your family. And are there adjustments that can be made once you get an understanding so that you can do better, right? Like, I had to, it was not an easy thing for me to, when I was first told by the counselor that you got trust issues. And I'm, what you talking about? I trust my husband. They're like, no, you don't. And I'm like, excuse me? They're like, no, you don't. Because if you trusted that his intention was correct with Jaylen, you wouldn't be so traumatized every time he interacts with him. Right? And so I was like, okay, keep talking. And so I had to have someone break it down in a way that helped me understand the foundational. I just thought I was upset because I didn't like the way that he handled Jaylen. So we had to get to the root of what was really, really going on. And when you peeled all them layers back, and I had to trace back to the fact that I had trust issues with men because of my dad not being there, because of all the relationships I had been in, the majority of them, prior to meeting your dad and marrying your dad. I had trust issues of men based on those factors in a way that still greatly impacted how I viewed your dad and trusted your dad, even though in my eyes, I loved him so much. And I trusted him because I married him.
I got a question, kind of unrelated, but related. So did you ever once, and while Jaylen was getting disciplined by my dad and you were so traumatized by it, did you ever once in your brain like, I need to leave this man?
Honestly, I didn't. You know what? I did not. I didn't know what
it's
to
like,
do.
That's what I'm thinking.
I didn't because I didn't know. I didn't know what to do. And looking back on it.
So ultimately, did you trust that? Did you feel like you made yourself trust that his intentions was good, even though you felt like they wasn't?
Ultimately, I felt like I had made a decision to get married, and we had made a decision to create this blended family, and that I was obligated to stick it out and figure it out because I did not want to wind up divorced.
That's crazy. That's why.
So until when we hit that rough patch where we actually did discuss divorce, it had gotten to a point where now that's when I came to a place of I don't know that I can do this anymore because my trust had, as far as how your dad dealt with Jayla, and it really still, even at that point, was for me, it was Jayla. And actually, oddly enough, it was majority of that, but it wasn't just Jayla. It actually, like, I didn't like the way he disciplined you on multiple occasions. I didn't like the way when him and Dom, I don't even know if it was ever Dom. I know him and Eric, on several occasions.
I feel like my dad's just like one of them people where like, okay, you think you grown, be grown. Let's be grown. Let's be grown. And then he start crashing. No, let's be grown. So.
What? And he's old school, down south,
Yeah,
like,
I was just about to say, but that also comes from like living in Tennessee. Shoot, Muggs had to pick cotton himself every day for $1.25.
His upbringing, and so again, that informed who he was and he was raised by women.
Yeah.
His dad wasn't in his life.
Right.
He didn't have an example. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, but the foundation for your dad, again, you got to trust through respect.
Right.
And so if he felt like he was being disrespected, even if it was one of his children that he birthed, if you think him and Dawson. So I went through the same feelings of when
I was just about to say when Dawson, because you ain't let him, do Dawson and Gabby.
Because I couldn't. Yeah, I had to draw the line. I just wasn't.
We are, for all points and purposes, cool. We're very mannerable people. We know how to conduct ourselves in public. We respect. We say yes, ma'am, yes, sir. No, ma'am, no, sir.
I agree.
Because kids nowadays, a lot of parents didn't do that. They let them run wild, and now old person say, "Excuse me, can I sit down? Be who you talking to? I don't got." Whoa.
Well, that's the truth. Listen, I believe in appropriate discipline. I don't take issue with discipline. I think it's necessary. I think that how far, again, it's appropriate discipline. And so when you get to a point, and I do understand there are, being able to teach children that there are consequences to your actions, and that's a trust thing too, right? Being able to. So for the parents having to trust each other and come to terms on what appropriate discipline looks like, one, so that you have each other's back. We didn't do that. And that for anybody that's watching, and if you're trying to navigate this stuff now, that is like super important. Like even for you, when you get to a relationship status and you looking to marry, right? Being able to have a conversation up front early on about coming to terms and agreement on what is the appropriate
what is and
way.
Isn't okay.
Exactly.
Basically.
Right? And so, there's this whole
let's move on. Let's move on because we just didn't just.
It's all about trust, but so, trusting. Trust within a family structure can be challenging for traditional families for various reasons based on your history. For blended families, again, I think it is easily exponentially magnified because of all the various histories and stakeholders, and particularly depending upon how long of a runway you have. Remember, again, for us, we are the unicorn. We just 90 days of knowing each other and then getting married and having that level of commitment. There was no way for us to walk through our history in a way to where we built a foundation of agreement, which would have fortified trust in a different way. Does that make sense?
Yes. So, okay, so what ways do external factors shape challenges of building trust within blended families, like such as societal stereotypes or systematic racism?
How do those things impact trust in blended families?
How do they shape the challenges of building trust?
Ooh, man, that's a multifaceted question.
I know I'm using her brain muscle today, y'all. Y'all want to see how smart she is? Here it is. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I think that I'm kind of it depends on the person.
You think so?
I do. So, for instance, like your dad and I are very different when it comes to. Remember, I talked about type A and type B when it comes to trust. Either you automatically trust until somebody gives you a reason not to, or you trust no one, which is me, and you know that. And your dad's the other way,
right? I feel like I low key feel like all of us low key got that trait from him.
And so,
but I feel like since Dom's converted his life to God, like he's dedicated to him, he's more of a I trust you until you give me a reason not to. But I feel like before then he'd be like, mm-mm.
So I think that the realities of systemic racism for people of color, they impact your daily life in different ways.
Yeah.
And so if you are a person where you are navigating the daily logistics of trying to be successful, whether you work for someone or you have your own business, and you are hitting hurdles that you know are there simply because you're a person of color, simply because you're Black, and the frustration and mistrust that comes along with having to deal with that over and over and over and over again, do I believe that makes a person jaded over time? Specifically, maybe not instantly the first time, but over time, absolutely. It makes you have to be completely, in my opinion, rooted and grounded in Christ and know who you are as a person to not allow feelings of or insecurities of what is wrong with me? Why can I not get this done or get that done? Or why do I keep getting passed over for X opportunities? And again, if you experience hitting a brick wall or doors being closed, you try to go get a loan for your business, can't access the money. You know, where you watch another colleague who is not
don't even Black, got the credit you got.
You know,
worse than what you got.
They're able to get a business loan, but you don't. You are trying to get approved for a house. You can't get the one that you want. You're told your limit is less.
So, okay, boom. You're saying that, and that's kind of leading to like the description in my brain of like societal and systematic like racism and whatever. You can't get X, Y, and Z, right? So then boom, as a Black man, Black blue collar man in America, you're trying to get X, Y, and Z so you can be an upstanding citizen and be looked at as the head of your household and the provider and all this stuff. Your wife is working herself too while your kids is in school, and the list goes on. And it's like, okay, now I have a colleague, but the colleague is a woman and she's more or less got more power in her situation than I do. So she told me she can help me out. But in order to help me out, I got to do X, Y, and Z with her. Or I got to go to dinner with her. Or I got to stay later at the office with her. And now but I really want this for my family. And now your wife is looking at you crazy. But you're really trying to do this for my family, and I'm explaining this to you. I promise I am, and this is what I'm doing, and blah, 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 blah. But now your wife thinks you're cheating all hours of the night. You know what I'm saying?
Do those scenarios happen? I'm sure.
No, I'm saying like those
Those are real things that present. But again, I think to protect yourself as an individual, married or not married, as an individual in a family, traditional or blended, you have to set boundaries and you have to be honest with yourself about making decisions that protect you and protect your family. And so there are always going to be opportunities for people to get all the way up to that line, all in the name of, I'm trying to help myself so I can help my family. But you know you're entering into risky waters, if you will, and putting yourself at risk, putting your marriage at risk, which is putting your family at risk, all in the name of trying to help your family. But at the end of the day, if you know that there is a chance that you can cross a line and that you may not be able to come back from, then the answer has to be no.
So what about from a child's perspective, from a societal, norm situation? Everybody got the new stuff. Everybody got the stuff on, and you got a daughter. Is she a stepdaughter? She's going in your closet, taking your clothes to school. You know what I'm saying? Like, what do you do in that situation?